Hey everyone, David Aragona here for another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. 3 Kentucky Derby prep races taking place across the country in a short span of time on Saturday evening, and included among them out west is the 6th race at Santa Anita. It is the Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby. This one, a $750,000 purse race going a mile and an eighth on the dirt for the 3-year-olds. Let's throw up the field of 9 runners signed on for this Santa Anita Derby, and many of the horses coming out of the local prep for this, the San Felipe, shown as short prices on this line, included among them the winner of the San Felipe, that the number 5 Practical Move, one of 2 Tim Yakteen trained runners in this race, the other Yakteen trainee being the number 6 National Treasure, one of those former Bob Baffert trainees who will be making his first start for the Tim Yakteen stable. And this does seem like a race where the horses that are shown as the top 4 choices on the morning line really seem like the strongest competitors coming in here. And I'll spend most of this preview talking about those runners because they can be difficult to separate. And you do want to get a sense of which ones are moving forward at the right time. Some of the other intrigue in the Santa Anita Derby is who's going to be able to pick up those Kentucky Derby qualifying points, 200 of them in total on the line, 100 to the winner of this race. The horse that doesn't need them is that morning line favorite Practical Move. He's already in the Kentucky Derby on points, but Go Rocket Ride, National Treasure, and Skinner, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th choices on the morning line, they all need to pick up points if they're going to secure a spot in the Kentucky Derby starting gate. Before we get to the contenders, let's take a look at some features in TimeformUS, beginning with the TimeformUS pace projector. This is a race that doesn't feature any kind of characterization with regard to running style. No fast pace flag. It's not saying it's going to favor horses on or the lead, just kind of a blank slate. The number 3, Go Rocket Ride, is shown on the front end, and that makes some sense. He's a horse that did show speed to lead in a sprint race on debut. I'll be interested to see how much speed we get from the number 4, One in Vermilion, a horse whose positioning on the pace projector might be somewhat affected by his last race where he acted up badly in the gate in the Sunland Park Derby and arguably should have been a scratch that day, but didn't really get a chance to show his customary early speed. So without that race showing, I would imagine that One in Vermilion might be shown up there contesting the pace with Go Rocket Ride. So maybe those two hook up in the early going. But again, I'm not predicting this to be a situation where the pace comes apart. You will know the number 7 Skinner is the one that gets that late pace rating on the pace projector. He will be hoping that this pace does come back to him because he is the one runner in this field that is a confirmed closer and will be looking to pass them all at the very end. Let's also take a look at the TimeformUS finish projector, one of the new features in TimeformUS. This you can find on the new version of TimeformUS that launched in DRF mobile PPs and more recently in your DRF desktop PPs right next to Classic and Formulator past performances. And the finish projector is just a visual representation of the power picks that you might be familiar with, selected by the TimeformUS algorithm that have long been showing up in the Classic version of TimeformUS. The added layer is that it shows the relationship between the horses at the finish of this race. And as you can see, kind of hard to separate the top 3, though the number 3, Go Rocket Ride, is shown as the narrow winner of this race over the number 5, Practical Move, and the number 6, National Treasure, just beating out those 2 Tim Yakteen trainees, with that number 7 Skinner charging up at the end on this finish projector in 4th. Well, let's go through the main contenders, and we'll begin by taking a look at the replay of the race that many of them are coming out of. That San Felipe Stakes run a month ago at Santa Anita, and that is Practical Move in those red silks. He just slipped through on the inside to take the lead at the top of the stretch, and he will run clear of this field to achieve a pretty convincing victory over the 2 rivals that he faces once again here. Go Rocket Ride battling back towards the inside, and Skinner making that last move on the far outside to get up for 3rd. But I didn't think there was anything too fluky about Practical Move winning this race. Sure, he got a good trip, just like he did 2 back in the Los Alamitos Futurity, but he ran a really fast race. That 1:19 TimeformUS speed figure, and especially that 1:21 final time figure, are 2 of the highest numbers that any 3-year-old has earned this year in the Kentucky Derby Trail. Practical Move, I mean, he won that race by 2.5 lengths. And if you watch the gallop out, he was pulling even further clear as they ran out into the clubhouse turn past the wire, opening up about 6 lengths on the horses that finished just behind him, about a furlong after the finish line. So I know a lot of people have questions about Practical Move handling at a distance. Well, that gallop out would suggest to you that it's going to be just fine for him. And even though he's by Practical Joke, a sire that has much more of a reputation as a sprinter and miler producer, the dam side, Practical Move, act naughty. There's plenty of stamina there. She was a router on the turf, and just physically, Practical Move looks like a much more robust, route-oriented horse than a lot of the progeny of Practical Joke that I've seen. So I don't want to worry too much about the pedigree. The visual cues that I get from this horse, say the 1.125 will be just fine, and he was an easy winner last time. I think he's very much the horse to beat in the Santa Anita Derby. As for the horses that finished behind him last time, Go Rocket Ride, I thought he was pretty game to get up for second that day. He was contesting the early pace, dropped back approaching the quarter pole, actually got past or lost ground to the horse that was setting the pace that day. Hijazi angled inside of that, fell in the stretch, and re-rallied to get back up into second. I thought that was a game performance from Go Rocket Ride in just the second start of his career. He's earned nice speed figures in both races so far. It's just asking a lot of this horse to improve again in the third start of his career while he's stretching out in distance once again. He might get a favorable pace scenario this time, especially if One in Vermilion is not used aggressively just to his outside, but I still think that it's a big ask for this horse, and he figures to be perhaps the second choice in this race. The number 7, Skinner, was the one that was closing at the end of that San Felipe to get up for third, and I thought he ran pretty well. He had kind of hinted that he had taken a big step forward from his 2-year-old season when he was a maiden winner off the layoff back in February at Santa Anita, looped the field to win by over 3 lengths that day with a nice 1:12 TimeformUS speed figure, and basically repeated that number last time when he finished third in the San Felipe. And you do want to note, that San Felipe was not a race that was coming apart at the end. Really, there was not much running going on from the back of the pack that day, and Skinner had to make a couple of moves to get up for third. First, to move from last to mid-pack around the far turn, about the 3/8 pole, and then in the stretch to pass the last few horses to get up for third at the very end of that race. So I thought that he did plenty of work to get up for third that day. He does need to take another step forward, though, if he is going to secure a spot in the Kentucky Derby starting gate and finish in the top 3 here, because once again, this is not a race that figures to feature a particularly contested early pace, so it doesn't seem like it's a race that's going to fall into his lap. I do think at a distance could work for him as a son of Curlin, even though there's some more speed on the bottom side of his pedigree. I think Skinner's going to run well here, but I wonder if this is the day for him to really win and beat the horses that finished ahead of him last time. An intriguing runner in this race is the number 6, National Treasure, the other runner going out for the Tim Yakteen barn. And this is him when he was still in the Bob Baffert stable, finishing third in the Grade 3 Sham much earlier in the season. This was all the way back at the beginning of January. So we have not seen National Treasure in action in 3 months. And he was the beaten favorite this day, going off at 3-5, finishing third to a couple of Bob Baffert trained stablemates. Now, Newgate, who was second, came back to win the Robert B. Lewis at his next start, so flattering the form there. Reincarnate has since secured a spot in the Kentucky Derby starting gate after a couple of third-place finishes in Arkansas, so the form from that sham has been just fine. The question with National Treasure is, can he move forward going into the Tim Yakteen barn, and how is he going to handle the added distance coming off a substantial layoff? Well, as for how he's going to do coming into this race, based on workouts, he couldn't be doing much better. He's always a horse that's trained well, but his recent workouts have been particularly impressive. He's always best in company, actually bested Reincarnate in some recent workouts, who he was paired with prior to that one start in the Arkansas Derby last weekend. So I feel like National Treasure is sitting on a big race. I do have some questions about him getting the 1.125 distance. To me, he doesn't strike me as a classic distance type, just the way he moves and his natural speed. I wonder if maybe he's a horse down the line. It's going to be better going a mile. But I do think National Treasure has ability. He showed it last year, and he's one that does project to run well on Saturday. Let's move on to some bigger prices. A couple of horses coming out of Maiden Company are the number one, I Don't Get It, and the number two, Dazzle Me Silver. We'll take a look at the two of them when they hooked up last time in a mile and the 16th maiden race at Santa Anita. That is I Don't Get It, closing down the center of the racetrack to get the victory. Dazzle Me Silver, that horse with that flashy gray face in between horses, will sort of flatten out at the very end to finish third in this race. Both of these horses earned decent speed figures. This was a pretty fast race for the maiden ranks, but they're going to have to get much faster to beat the horses that already have proven form against Stakes Company. You can see I Don't Get It lost to Skinner 2 back. Now, I Don't Get It did have a troubled start that day. He stumbled coming out of the starting gate, which probably cost him a higher placing, but he didn't move forward that much from a speed figure standpoint last time out, and he just feels like one that's going to have to do a lot better if he's going to be competitive in the Santa Anita Derby. And the same goes for the number two, Dazzle Me Silver. I actually think this horse has some ability. He's a maiden coming into this race, having finished third in both career starts, a pretty inexpensive purchase at auction for trainer Keith DeSormo, who has a lot of those, but this horse has a nice frame to him, a big stride. I think there's ability here. I just feel like it's asking too much too soon, throwing this maiden into the deep end of the pool against some of the best 3-year-olds in California in the Santa Anita Derby. Let's move on to a horse that's coming out of the Sunland Park Derby. That is the number 9, Low Expectations. Also in this race is One in Vermilion, though I'm not going to highlight him because he was never really a factor this day. After, as I noted at the start of this preview, he was one that acted up badly in the starting gate. And you can see, just from a visual standpoint, no, these horses are not running in slow motion. They're just really tired at the end of this Sunland Park Derby. So it takes a while for this final furlong to be completed. And you could see the horse who's second here, Low Expectations, just kind of going up and down in the final furlong of this race. Hence the low 93 TimeformUS speed figure that he got for that second place finish. He ran a faster number at his prior start at Santa Anita, but that was going a mile. Seemed like the added distance didn't necessarily agree with him last time, and I still have questions about his overall quality stepping up against this level of competition. One more horse to take a look at is a new face, that's for sure, in the Santa Anita Derby, and that is the number 8 Mandarin Hero, a horse that we have never seen in the United States before. And we're going to take a look at this replay of his last race in Japan. This was the Kumatori Show, a race run at the end of February, going the about distance of 1.1 miles. And that's Mandarin Hero closing down the center of this very sandy dirt course to get up for second on this day, losing by about a length to the winner of this race. And I get it. It's pretty tough to assess the quality of these horses coming in from Japan, not being too familiar with that form. I did do a little bit of looking into who he was racing against last time. The winner of that last race that we just showed, a horse named Hero Call, he had run in a tougher stakes race last December where he had finished fourth against the winner of that race, which was Derma Sotogake. And people recognize Derma Sotogake, of course, on this Kentucky Derby trail as the winner of the UAE Derby, generally regarded as the top Japanese hope for the Kentucky Derby this year. So that says to me, Hero Call, a horse who beat Mandarin Hero last time, no match for Derma Sotogake. This horse probably a cut below the best 3-year-olds in Japan, even though he comes in here with a 4-for-5 career record. So I would be surprised if Mandarin Hero stacks up favorably against these top 3-year-olds in Southern California. And I'm not sure he's going to be that much of a price in this race, just given the general success of Japanese horses on the world stage. He feels like one that is supposed to be a pretty generous price in this Santa Anita Derby. I'm not sure he will be. Well, let's throw out my picks for this Santa Anita Derby, and I'm not getting too creative. I just think Practical Move was the best horse last time in the San Felipe, and I'm not sure what's supposed to have changed in a month's time. I'm not that concerned about the added distance, just an extra 16th of a mile, going 1 1/8 miles, and Practical Move was so impressive in these last 2 victories. If he puts forth a similar effort on Saturday, and I have every reason to believe he will, looking at his workouts, I just think he's likely to beat this field again, and maybe he won't be so underrated moving on to the first Saturday in May next month. I do have the number 6 National Treasure, the other Yacht training in second. I'm interested to see what we get from him coming off the layoff, first time out for the Yacht barn, but I do prefer his stablemate, Practical Move, in the Santa Anita Derby on Saturday at Santa Anita. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.